We're going to be presenting a kind of a second session, a second segment on ritual purity. Now that sounds really exciting. Yes, I saw that yawn. But the point is this, that there are two major flashpoints of contention between Jesus and the established religious authorities, both in the temple and in the synagogue. There are two flashpoints, and that's Sabbath observance and ritual purity. Why are your disciples eating with hands unwashed? They're full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Paul purifies himself. Jesus, Joseph, and Mary are purifying themselves. Other Jewish Christians in the city of Jerusalem are undergoing ritual purification, and it is a big deal in the Gospels and surrounding the life and ministry of Jesus. So anything that we ever do on Shabbat or Sabbath observance and ritual purity, that's taking you right to the heart of first century issues, flashpoints of contention in the life and ministry of Jesus. So I hope that you're able to bear with this, because we're going to go right down into the weeds from the get-go. And you are going to be able to touch and connect and get a greater sense of clarity on at least 50 plus different passages from the Bible. I wrote an article on this issue of Jesus and ritual purity back in 2018. It's online. You can find it if you want. Just put in ritual purity and Nunnally. It'll come up. I also did a video based on that article that was published in 2018. I did it the next year in 2019. So if you're not a heavy-duty reader, it's only about, 5 or 6, 7, 8 pages long, the article. But if you're not the reader kind of thing, or you just want to listen to it on your phone when you're riding down the road, there's a video with audio that came out in 2019, the next year. Also connected to this study is some material that I put together in 2021, almost 2 years ago now, that did the middle wall of partition that Paul talks about in Ephesians chapter 2, which is where we're going to start. That's going to be the jump-off point. Since it's already been done, it's been here in Sunday school, it's out there online, I'm just going to kind of fast forward through that, because I want to connect that with, use that as a sort of a jumping off point, but I want to connect it to this additional kind of point of clarity that I was able to come to while I was in the air at 30,000 feet. Are you ready? Seatbelts fastened, trays in their upright and locked position. All right. Hopefully this will control. Yep. All right. So we start with that Ephesians passage, because it has to do with ritual purity in an interesting kind of way. You read it and you go, I don't see any language about ritual purity in there. The dots will connect. Jesus is our peace. On the cross, he made two groups, Jews and Gentiles, into one, and broke down the middle wall of partition, is the way it reads in King James. He broke down the barrier of the dividing wall that separates Jews and Gentiles and prevents non-Jews who are not in a state of ritual purity, or anybody not in a state of ritual purity, from going any closer to the presence of God as represented by the Holy of Holies. By abolishing in his flesh the hatred. And so that abolishing in his flesh is a direct connection to the cross. This has to do with what's one of the things that Jesus accomplished on the cross. This. So the question is, well, what in the world is the middle wall of partition? We don't have that anywhere else in the Bible, so you go to stuff outside the Bible. This book was written 134-ish BC, about the days of the Maccabees, about the Maccabean revolt. Has nothing to do with Roman Catholicism, has nothing to do with Christianity. It's 100+ years before Jesus was born. And it says that the high priest Alchemist gave orders to tear down the wall of the inner court of the sanctuary. And they say it's the work of the prophets. Well, we don't know about that in the prophets. We don't hear about that in the Bible. These people just knew that thing had been there a long time. Some barrier, some kind of a dividing wall. What, by the way, I love that graphic, don't you? the warrior priests of the Maccabees. Yeah, it's neat when you can have both and. Philo of Alexandria, first century Jew, contemporary of Jesus. And he says, still more abounding and peculiar is the zeal of all of them for the Jews for the temple. Why is that? Because death without appeal is the sentence against those of other races who penetrate the inner confines of the temple. Everybody can go. The outer court is available to everybody. We call that outer court the court of the... Yes. So anybody can go there. But then there's this barrier. We've already read about it. Ephesians, First Maccabees. Now we get it in Philo. Everybody else got to stay outside. If you're not Jewish, you're not in a state of ritual purity, you can't go in. Josephus, first century Jew, contemporary of the apostles, writing in the same Greek as the New Testament at the same time the New Testament is being written. And Josephus says, Titus, the Roman general who would eventually become the emperor, Titus upbraided John and his friends. These are Jewish rebels. They're zealots that we read about sometimes in the New Testament, like Simon the Zealot, a disciple of Jesus. He said to them, was it not you who placed the railing before the sanctuary, in front of the sanctuary? Was it not you that arranged along it those slabs engraved in Greek characters and in our own, he's saying Latin, and in our own, proclaiming that they may that none may pass that barrier? There's again that barrier or middle wall of partition. Same Greek that Paul uses, by the way. And did not we permit you to put to death anyone who passed by it, who went beyond the barrier, even if that person is a Roman citizen? This is almost unknown in Roman jurisprudence, but it was in place for the Jewish people as an exception to the normal rule of the way that Romans rolled. Romans tried Romans and executed Romans. Jews couldn't do that. Josephus again, within the court of the Gentiles and not very far distant was a second court, accessible by a few steps and surrounded by a low stone barrier. There it is again, middle wall of partition, with an inscription prohibiting the entrance of a foreigner under the penalty of death. Death is the penalty. Now we get the rabbis. You ready for the early rabbis? I know it's rabbis this, Dead Sea Scrolls that. Somebody hit me with a wiffle ball bat. It's an Adam Sandler movie. Inside the Temple Mount was a latticed railing. That's the barrier. 10 handbreadths high, which is about 3.5, 4 feet. It had 13 breaches that the Greek kings had made, broken through this, because they didn't want any separation between Jews and Greeks. They wanted Greeks to be able to, when they were in control, to access the entire temple. And then these had been fenced up again. Here's another text from the Mishnah, the earliest stuff that was written down by the early rabbis. The Temple Mount is still more holy than the walls of Jerusalem or anything within the walls. So you got Jerusalem's a holy city, but the Temple Mount is even more sacred than the rest of Jerusalem, because no man or woman that has an issue of blood, no menstruant, no woman after childbirth, remember Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, and when their time of their purification, right, had come, okay? So no woman after childbirth may enter therein. The rampart, that's going up a series of steps, the holy place, the temple proper, is still more holy than the rest of the temple, is what the rabbis are saying. Because no Gentiles and none who have contracted corpse uncleanness come anywhere close to being in contact with a dead person or part of a dead person may enter therein. So notice in the Mishnah, they're adding no foreigner, no non-Jew, and anyone who is ritually impure. The Tosefta was written about the same time as the Mishnah. This is all rabbinic stuff, and it makes it even clearer than what we've read before in the Mishnah. All unclean people who have entered the area from Nicanor's gate, and that is the gate beautiful. That's what it's called in Acts 3. That's the only access point that you can go from the court of the Gentiles into the holy place, where only Jews in a state of ritual purity could go. Okay, so the gate beautiful and inward, behold, they are subject to, if they did so deliberately, to be put to death. I'm trying to establish here that entrance by someone who was not permitted, a foreigner or a Jewish person who wasn't in a state of ritual impurity, the penalty of this was death. Everybody clear on this? Okay. If they entered into the holy place, behold, they are subject to the death penalty. That's clear as it can be. We've got it written in black and white, or whatever a LCD projector does. We also have archaeology on this. In 1871, a Frenchman found an inscription at the Temple Mount. And then again in 1936, an Englishman found another inscription. The two matched. It was the same message on both of these inscriptions. And guess what it said? Let no foreigner enter the parapet, the partition that surrounds the temple precincts. No foreigner. Anyone caught violating this will be held accountable for his ensuing death. So now we've got it written in stone. These go back to the days of the temple. This is pre-AD 70. This is 1st century AD, 1st century BC, something, whenever this was posted. This is the word of the day in the time of the New Testament. Now we have the temple, and I'm going to have to grab my pointer. And this is the gate beautiful. This is the court of the Gentiles. This next door right here is this is the golden gate. This is the gate beautiful, and this is the actual temple. Everything else this is the retaining wall built by Herod the Great. This is the court of the Gentiles, but this is the actual temple, and I want you to notice that there's a fence that goes around it. Here's a close-up of the same thing. Now we're inside the temple. Notice again, the court of the Gentiles, the place where the buying and selling was done, the Holy of Holies right here. But around the holy place was constructed a fence about 3.5 to 4 feet high. And that's where the slabs were. That's where the warnings were. No foreigner and no one ritually impure on pain of death. Everybody clear on that? Hope so. I've got video that I want you to see. Here's the plaza for the western wall, the pinnacle of the temple. There was a bridge there that went over into where the high priests were and where their homes were. This is the southern wall of the temple. These are the Huldah gates right here. Notice again, you can look inside of the temple and you can see the holy place, quote unquote, the actual temple itself. The southern steps where you entered the temple, either here or there. Then you've got the eastern side of the Temple Mount and the court of the Gentiles, the place of buying and selling, the holy place itself, court of the women, court of the men, court of the priests, and then the Holy of Holies inside the building there. Around it is that fence, and you can see it very clearly here. This warns non-Jews and people not in a state of ritual purity. That's as far as you can go, the court of the Gentiles, and no further. Do it and you risk death. Okay? Here's another video. That first one took us right up to the Temple Mount so we could look over in. This is going to take us into the courts of the temple. All this is computer reconstruction. You know this stuff doesn't exist right now today, right? So this is the eastern wall of the temple. Right below us is going to be the Golden Gate that we call it. Eastern Gate, Shushan Gate, Gates of Mercy. And you can see a little bit over into the temple. You can see the building that goes above the Holy of Holies. Now you're beginning to be able to look over this eastern wall into the court of the Gentiles. And what else do we see? At the end of the court of the Gentiles is the middle wall of partition. And there were entrances, but there were also guards at these gates, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But what we're going to do is we're going to do what we normally would not be able to do as non-Jews, and that is to go into the court of the women. And then you ascend a series of steps, and there is a covered or roofed, small, thin area called the court of the Israelites, or the men. Then you get the court of the priests, and then straight into the Holy of Holies. When you read your Bible now, after jumping through these hoops, you're understanding what you're reading, right? You know where you are. You're kind of like a participant in this story. You know it not by trying to make up that party in your mind, but you know it because you've seen it. Ray?
People are coming in here. I'm assuming people come into this place to worship God. And I never thought of this before, but why are the Gentiles, why are they interested in coming in here? Because they're non-Jews? I don't know. Maybe, I guess they're believers, but...
It would be for the same reason that you encounter a group of people in the book of Acts who are called God-fearers, and they're not Jews, and they're also not full converts, or what we call proselytes. So there's native-born Jews, biological Jews, there's Jews by conversion, proselytes, and then there are these God-fearers. Well, why would people who are not Jewish ethnically be attracted to Judaism? Higher level of morality, sense of connectedness to roots, the God of Israel, the Bible, etc. So out in the Greek and Roman world even, not just here in Jerusalem, but in the Greek and Roman world, you have people who are being attracted to this God of the Bible. You know, wouldn't it be cool if we were all living lives that made what we're into so attractive that there would be more people attracted to what's going on with the body of Christ, the people of God, the covenant community today? And it's by degree, I know. Let's just turn up the heat a little bit. Let's live it. Let's shine it, right? So people will be attracted by the truth. People are attracted to truth. People love freedom. People love clarity. People love a sense of connectedness and roots and that sort of thing. And that's kind of what we're involved in as well. So back to the court of the Gentiles versus the holy place. You see it very clearly now, right? Can you pick out the middle wall of partition in this picture? You got it down? It's the fence before the steps. What happens to you if you're a non-Jew, and if you are, or if you're Jewish and not in a state of ritual purity? Remember that passage in the Tosefta? Very clear. What happens to those kind of people if they go beyond this fence right here, the middle wall of partition, the dividing wall of hostility of Ephesians chapter 2? What happens to those people? Done, right? If they
can't kill them there in the temple. They have to take them outside the city walls to stone them, right?
So one would think, and I don't have a Bible passage to prove this. Well, I kind of sort of do. They were trying to kill Paul in the temple in Acts 21, in the temple. And my question to myself was, who in the world, who in their right mind, what Jew in their right mind would risk defiling the temple by an unnatural death, like an execution? And the response is, their accusation was that Paul had already defiled the temple. So in their mind, in the mob's mind, the temple was already in a state of ritual impurity because Paul had brought Greeks into the holy place. It's a passage we're going to deal with in just a short bit here in this discussion. Milt?
Related but unrelated. My wife got an email from a friend who's a supporter of Israel and says there's a current proposed law in Israel that if they find a Christian in Israel, they can get up to 2 or 3 years in prison.
For proselytizing. for evangelizing. Yes, okay. It was true as of a week ago. Just this past week, Benjamin Netanyahu required that those two cabinet ministers that introduced that bill to pull the bill. So it's no longer a matter of discussion. I'm thankful for that. Yes.
Up until this morning, I always thought that middle wall of partition was when Jesus on the cross, when the veil was split.
Okay, it's a part of the same process. The veil being split is another reference to clearer, greater, easier access to the presence of God. It is connected, no doubt about it. These two, the veil and the middle wall of partition, are not the same thing, but the process and the price paid for that access to the very presence of God is one and the same. They are indeed connected. Yeah, right. Okay. Now we have reached another point of clarity. And you and everybody else that has joined Miriam in that, we've just taken another step in the direction of the world of the Bible, away from our technological, English-speaking, 21st century, modern America, and back into the world. You've seen TV shows. You've watched The Chosen. You've seen The Passion of the Christ, or the Ten Commandments, biblical movies and TV shows, and you've said inside, if you haven't even vocalized it, man, I wish I had been there. Wouldn't it be cool to be alive back in the day? Wouldn't it have been neat to be a part of that event because it's visualized? You've been able to see it. That same thing, that wish that you have had, even if you didn't express it verbally, I wish that if I could have only been there, if I could have witnessed, if I could have participated, if I could have been a part of that story. You just took another step in that direction, that kind of clarity. You've taken another step into the direction of putting yourself fully into the world of the Bible. All right, I've got a couple of pictures here that I took. I would like to direct your attention to this gray area right here. It's a little bit different than these modern blocks of stone. There's a guy walking by there. I was really thankful that he walked by and interrupted the picture because it gives you perspective on size, right? So right here, notice that this is the Dome of the Rock, and it's sitting where the two temples set. So we're in the approximate area where the middle wall of partition would have run around the holy place, yes? And we have an outcropping of rock when the destruction that took place in AD 70 and others, components of that took place afterward. We have an outcropping of bedrock. That's that gray area that it's colored differently. And now you have a close-up of that. It's this raised area right here. That is an outcropping of bedrock that has been worked by human hands. It's been squared off by human hands. I think that, and others among the group of people that I work with and teach with in Israel, we think that this is a part of the foundation of the wall, of the middle wall of partition that's still in place, because it couldn't be broken down because it is bedrock. Does that make sense to you? It's in the right place. It's been worked by human hands. It's squared off so that it could function as a foundation. So, I mean, I think this is X marks the spot territory right here, guys. Is that not cool? You can see this today. If you're on the Temple Mount, you can walk up to it and stand on it. The foundation of the middle wall of partition. We got to move on. All right, so we saw the videos, and I'm frozen now. Okay, keep going. You can do it. I know you've got it in you. I love technology. There we go. All right, so I'm on a plane, 33,000 feet. I'm flying from Fort Myers to Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am reading a rabbinic text off of my telephone called Avot de Rabbi Natan. It's an ancient work. It goes back to the days of the Mishnah. And in chapter 2, I came across a passage that revolutionized. It took me, like Miriam, it took me another step closer to the world of Jesus, the apostles, the writing of the New Testament, the Bible, right? This whole process started, though, in 2012 when a friend of mine, I think those are his fingers, Eli Shukron, you've heard his name mentioned before, has been an archaeologist for a quarter of a century now. Most of that time spent digging in the city of David and directly adjacent to the temple. And so near the Temple Mount in 2012, Eli found this little piece of clay that had been formed in the shape of like a token. And I'll give you a close-up of the same. And it says in Hebrew, pure to, and then you have Yod, Y, and then He, H. Pure to Yah. You see what I've written below it, right? Pure to Yah. Do you know what Yah means? Yeah. Is there anything in the Bible that does stuff like that? Where you say, have Jesus or God referred to as Yah? How about like Hallelujah? It's an abbreviated form of Yahweh. So pure to Yahweh. Scholars like Eli have suggested that it was a token. It was a part of a process whereby you underwent purification, pure to Yah. You underwent ritual purification, and to prove that, someone gave you a token like this. I am absolutely certain. There's excavation going on still in the city of David and all around, still around the area of the Temple Mount. I am certain more of these will be discovered because it seems to be a part of a system that had been created. We are not told about this in the New Testament. But once we figure out how the system worked, you can understand that as the backdrop against a dozen or more New Testament events, which you'll see in just a second. All right? So, that is the correct time, isn't it? 11:39. Wow. Thank you all. Y'all are amazing. All right. So you have a token that is given to someone who has undergone ritual immersion. Well, where would they undergo ritual immersion? In the area of the temple, there are over 100 ritual immersion baths that have been discovered. They're called mikvaot in Hebrew. Mikveh, singular, mikvaot, plural. Ritual immersion baths. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the precursor to a baptismal pool. You go down into it by a series of steps. It is full of water, and you get wet when you're in there, and you walk up a new person. Come on. Yeah? Have we just taken another step? Probably should have 10 or 15 pictures of mikvaot, right? But in your mind's eye, online with Google, just type in M-I-K-V-E-H, and images for M-I-K-V-E-H, and you'll get all kinds of examples of pictures of different ritual immersion baths or pools that after going in and immersing yourself, you would be given a token like this to prove, once you walk into the temple, that you are ritually pure and can continue. If you're Jewish and you're ritually pure, you can give that token or show that token to someone at the door, and you can enter in closer to the presence of God, into the court of the women. If you're male, the court of the Israelites. If you have an offering to present, you can hand that over a banister to the priests and watch as that animal is prepared for and then sacrificed right there in front of the Holy of Holies. So this is the beginning of the process. We read about people in the New Testament. Never mind Old Testament. It's already there. There's immersion, there's sprinkling, there's all kinds of purification according to the law of Moses. But now we're talking about in the New Testament, things that we have read over for years and just kind of Okay, whatever, and moved on to something that you're more comfortable with. Hardly feel the speed bump. But this starts the process. Now, what ends the process? That if you're given a token, well, who do you show it to or give it to prove that you're Jewish and you're in a state of ritual purity? The Bible answers this question. And look at all the passages. Now it's time to get your cell phone out, turn it sideways, take a picture, because this is a whole Bible study in and of itself. In fact, when I started down this road, I didn't realize it, but I was about to make another discovery, one that I've never read in a commentary, never read it in an article, never was taught it in Bible college, seminary, graduate school in Israel, PhD, never heard anybody talk about this. But there are doorkeepers or sometimes it's the same phrase is translated gatekeepers. I'm giving you ways that you can search this online, whatever, hard copy concordance at home, but it's there. This language is there in your Bible. And it's not there once or twice or 2 or 3 times. It's there, look at them, dozens of times. I would rather be a doorkeeper than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. You know this stuff. See, this is already in there. Now all we've got to do is sort it out. So there are these doorkeepers. Well, who in the heck are they? They are Levites, not the Levites who are charged with things like singing or playing musical instruments. But these people are a special group of Levites who have been charged with the responsibility for keeping order on the Temple Mount and guarding the gates, among which are the gate beautiful, which allows you entrance into the holy place. Keep that in mind, because you know that there's this important passage in Acts chapter 3 that plays into that. We'll get to it. But then, this was the discovery that I made. There's a whole bunch of other passages in the second chunk of stuff that doesn't mention, it mentions gatekeepers, it mentions doorkeepers, but it mentions them as almost separate from the rest of the Levites. So these people have evidently, they're not even associated with the rest of the tribe. They're called gatekeepers, doorkeepers, and there's no Levitical identity attached in that second set of Bible passages, this stuff. And so the conclusion has to be that by the time that these, and notice that they're almost all of them, the Second Chronicles, the Nehemiah, the Ezra and stuff, this is all stuff written very late at the end of what we would call the Old Testament period. So they had evidently, there's a process that has gone on whereby people, as well as the writers of Scripture, have come to identify these folks as a special guild of workers in the temple. They don't do sacrifice, they don't sing, they don't play musical instruments, they don't carry wood and clean and do all these other things that Levites are charged with doing. These people have become a special, can I call it class? Guild comes to mind, of workers in the temple. They're all still Levites and everybody knows it. By this point, by the end of the Old Testament period, you don't even have to give the Levitical identity. Everybody knows that if you're a gatekeeper in the temple, you're a Levite. So it's not even mentioned in that second set. In the first set, it is mentioned. It's very clear that these gatekeepers, doorkeepers are Levites. Down here, it's not even mentioned that they're Levites. It's kind of taken for granted. Yeah, of course, if you're in the guild of the gatekeepers or the doorkeepers, well, naturally, you're a Levite. Biologically, you are connected to that tribe. So absolutely fascinating. These would be then the people who take up the token, pure to Yah, right? So what's left on the table, now that we've got these points of clarity, we know that the person has a token to prove. If it's a death penalty for going in without being ritually pure, this is something that's really important to these people, guys. Paul almost lost his life over this situation. We have clarity because we have so much material. All we had to do was gather it together. It's been there all along. I'm 67. This stuff the dots are just starting to connect for me. But now we have, every time, like with Miriam, every time you come to a point of clarity, what have you done? You've just taken a step closer to the world, the life, the dynamics of the ministry of Jesus, the realities of first century life, stuff that the disciples, that Paul, Jesus, they took for granted. It was just a part of their world they grew up with. Now we're just scratching, clawing, and pulling our way toward that world. And not in a dashboard Jesus kind of way, not in a once upon a time they all lived happily ever after make-believe kind of way. We're actually collecting data, real evidence, and connecting the dots. And for me, man, it's like at 33,000 feet, I'm about to show you a text that I almost raptured. And I would hope that the plane wouldn't be destroyed, go down, kill everybody and stuff like that. But it was one of those moments, one of those moments. The question is not who took up the token. We know these guys are on point. They're on the job. They have a responsibility delegated to them. They've been doing it for hundreds of years, and they know how to run this system. The question is, where does the person get the token to begin with? If there's an officiant, one of these Levitical doorkeepers, gatekeepers, who take up the token, well, how does the pilgrim, the person who's going into the temple, how does that person receive the token to begin with? And this is where we come to Avot de Rabbi Natan. It's approximately the same time period from the Mishnah and the Tosefta. And I've read this text before, but you know how it is. You're reading with a certain set of lenses all the time. They're colored by you're busy, you're worried about picking up your kids on time from daycare or whatever. Of course, I've read Avot de Rabbi Natan before. But now I'm reading it and I'm sitting there in the airplane. I'm almost half asleep. Had to get up early that morning. And this jumps off the page at me. They're talking about the issue of ritual purity. Ritual purity. It's relevant to what we're doing. If you're reading ahead, good for you. When one's wife is in her period of impurity and her husband wants to sleep with her, he wants to, but he doesn't do it. He holds himself back. Is it because somebody's going to see him, or somebody's going to know, they're going to find out? Or is it because somebody's going to say anything, interrupt, and like, hey, stop, don't, have relations with your wife, it's not the right time of the month or whatever? And the answer is no. He is only afraid of the poked al hatvilah. I put the Hebrew there for you if you're interested. He's only concerned about the officer who officiates at the ritual immersion. There's the guy. We just caught the guy who committed the crime. We found the smoking gun. There is an officiant. I didn't think that I would ever find the rest of the story on this. Not everything that you want is included in ancient literature. You combine Dead Sea Scrolls, Josephus, Philo, rabbinic literature, inscriptionary evidence, apocryphal stuff, pseudepigraphical stuff, and you don't always find evidence to solve every crime, to figure everything out. You know what I'm saying? So then there's speculation, and you know what that's good for, right? But it's really neat when you've got an ancient text in hand that walks you through the process now. It walks you through the process. It tells you who the guy is who oversees the ritual immersion, who it is who gives out the token, and then who it is that you give the token to. We've got a complete, perfect system now. And we just saw it right in front of our eyes, reconstructed. And I have never seen anything written, spoken about, taught, video, whatever, on what you just heard. I sent it to a friend of mine, and he just said, just wow. This guy teaches in Israel all the time. He's constantly there. And he went, that buttons up the jacket right there. The person who checks or oversees the immersion, that's the guy that gives it. Levites guarding the gates take it up. It's a perfect system. Turn on Carter's mic.
Anybody there? There we go. Question. Many years ago, you were teaching, and you mentioned the inspector of the mail. And you remember the name that you gave him, or what his name was? Now, is this the same person?
The inspector of the what?
Mail. Make sure he was an Israelite. Check for circumcision.
Oh, that I don't know.
Okay.
It could be, though. This guy, the word poked in Hebrew, it means an officer, an official, someone he's appointed. He's got street credibility. So it
could be.
Could be.
Question 2, in the place where they go to be baptized, are they fully clothed?
All right, by the way, you've seen these in person, haven't you?
Yes.
The mikvaot, the ritual immersion baths, yeah. So on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, they are there, I promise. Should have thrown some pictures in, but do that on your own. Images for Mikveh. Homework. Are they fully clothed? According to rabbinic law, they can't be clothed at all. According to rabbinic law, a woman can't even go into the immersion pool with a ribbon in her hair because the water has to come in contact. Can't be any water bubbles, that would keep water from coming in contact with every place on your skin, on your body. And so according to rabbinic law, it's self-administered. You do it yourself. So there's not like a pastor standing beside you. That would get pretty dicey, wouldn't it? Yeah, at my stage of the game, I'm not really interested in even wearing a bathing suit in public, much less going the next step. Nothing here to see, folks. Everybody moving right along. So how then do you do it? There is a text somewhere, and I'm going to find it eventually, where the officiant looks in for like a woman. Doesn't matter about a man. It's man and man thing, and that's like a locker room. That's right, community shower. That's okay. But if it's a woman who's undergoing ritual immersion for any number of things, she's buried a near of kin, she's just had a child, 40 days male, 80 days for a female child, then she goes under the water, and the officiant looks in and sees the bubbles coming up. I know there's a text somewhere, and I'll find it. When I do, I'll cue you in. Fair enough? So that's kind of the system there. The point is, there is this poked, this official who oversees ritual immersion. If it's done right, if it's actually done and done right, then he will issue the token. Person goes up to the Temple Mount, goes up the southern steps onto the court of the Gentiles, goes up to the gate beautiful, and gives the token to the poked, to the Levitical doorkeeper, gatekeeper. It's perfect. You just don't take people's word for a matter of life and death. That is that important to a society. So there we have it. How does this impact our understanding of specific New Testament texts? Take a look at Luke 2. There we have, and this is Jesus is 40 days old, according to the law of Moses, for a male child, 40 days of ritual impurity, and they show up at the temple. When the days for their purification, and that's both Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, because they all touch the amniotic fluid and blood and stuff like that, so they're all ritually impure by contact. by childbirth, according to the law of Moses, were completed, they brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. They couldn't enter the temple without this process. There is ritual immersion. There is the observation by the poked. There is the issuing of the pure tuyah. There's the trip into the temple, and there's the presentation or giving of that token, pure tuyah, to the gatekeeper / doorkeeper. It's perfect. And we've got evidence for every step of the way now, whether it's archaeology or ancient text. We've got data to reconstruct an instance, a situation in which the Holy Family takes part. So is this relevant to us now? Yes, it is. Have we just taken one of those steps? Yeah. Yes.
Do the women get a token as well?
They would have to. They would have to immerse, and they would have to enter. Now, they can only go as far as the court of the women, but that's one step closer to the presence, right? So, yeah, good question, Ray.
So this wouldn't be a one-time thing, I guess. It would be anytime, I mean, I don't know what all declares you as unclean. I know touching a dead body or the menstrual thing. So anytime you want to go into the mount or whatever, would you have to go through this? Or would
Yes.
it depend on whether you touched an unclean thing?
I think it's a one-size-fits-all. They're not going to be discriminating between, oh, well, you're just a farmer and blah, blah, blah. No, it's everybody. Everybody's got to have a think a token. That's why I'm absolutely certain more will be found. Karen?
What were the people afraid of for the gatekeeper? That they'd be killed. But when he said he wanted to sleep with his wife but dared not, I'm trying to. What would the gatekeeper
why would
do?
he be more afraid of somebody who saw or heard or whatever than the gatekeeper? I don't know.
I was just wondering where
Maybe there's an examination that goes on.
Would the water be blood tinged or?
I think it's a matter of days. You have to wait a certain number of days for different kinds of ritual impurity. And if you show up and you say, yeah, I just had sex with my wife last night, he'll say, I'm sorry, you may as well not waste your time. If you go in the water, I'm not giving you a token because you got to wait 3 days. If that hasn't happened, for the contact with a part of a corpse or a dead person, it's 7 days. So if you show up there on day 4, he's going to turn you away. So there's probably like an examination or whatever. And your words may not be enough. I don't know that part of the process. I'm trying to follow the ticketing, the token thing. But it's possible that you'd have to have somebody, come and testify your testimony plus the testimony of another person or two. That I don't know. Yes.
So every day.
This is fascinating, isn't it?
Every day they kill an animal for their food. So they're touching a dead body every single day.
This is of a human being. This
No,
only has to do with a human being. Ritual impurity doesn't have to do with animals. It has to do with people.
So when they scooped the honey out of the lion, that was okay?
Probably not.
Okay.
Probably not. But for this issue of ritual purity, we're talking the difference between the days of the judges, 1200 BC, and first century BC. And it's just, there's not that kind of concern. That lion had evidently not been killed with proper ritual slaughter. It died of itself. It died of fighting with another animal or something like that. So that's probably why that would be a problem. Yeah, okay. John chapter 11, we get another instance. This one almost got by me, y'all, but it's there. The Passover, the Jews was at hand, and many people, Jews, were going up to Jerusalem to celebrate the festival of Passover. And before Passover, they showed up in order to purify themselves. Think this process that we just spelled out. When you read this passage now, you know what that means. And not because Wave Nunnally said so. All I did was put the data, the evidence on the screen. And then we connect the dots. You then, this is what we do with Bible Unplugged. I'm not pulling, things out of my sleeve, out of my hat, This is not a magic show. And I don't do this thing about, well, back in Jesus' day, the rabbis used to teach. Or back in Jesus' day, the rabbis practiced. And just leave it to you to take my word for it. I show you the same stuff that I'm looking at. That's the way we roll. You know this, faith builders, right? I mean, we've only been doing this in June. It'll be 26 years. We've only been doing this 26 years, but that's the way we've rolled for 26 years. Everything that I write, it's always documented like that. On the videos, it's always documented like that. Because I am not the authority. I can only go so far as the data will allow me to go. And I could start naming names, but then we'd be here till Jesus came back, of people who do roll like that. It's, take it from me. I'm the authority. I'm God's anointed man with power. And that's not the way we roll. If you guys are all chosen people, royal priesthood and holy nation, you deserve the same data that I look at. And that's the way I've always looked at it. Okay, so there you have a second example, New Testament. In the book of Acts, I told you we would look at this text, and we're going to run through these really quickly. You get the guy who is being laid every day at the gate beautiful. Why? He couldn't get in. He wasn't allowed in. He had a physical defect. Well, why at the gate beautiful? Because that's the way everybody went into who was insistent on getting as close to the presence of God went. It's the bottleneck. This is where the traffic was going, and that's where an alms beggar would be situated. But he couldn't get in. Why is that? No one who has a defect shall approach. And the insinuation there is approach the presence of the Lord, approach the altar of sacrifice, etc., etc. A blind man or there it is. We're going to keep on going. You see how that worked together? All right, in the book of Acts, and I'm just going to put these up and run through them real quick. Paul is encouraged by the Jewish Christian leadership, James and the other elders. They've heard stories about you and how you are not an observant Jew anymore, and you're telling people to forget about the law of Moses and stuff like that. Here's what we'd encourage you to do as an example, as a witness. Go and purify yourself along with a bunch of other guys that we've got here and who need to do the same thing, Jewish Christians. And what are they doing? Just like Jesus, Joseph, and Mary, they're participating in this business of ritual purity. They're going through, they're tapping into that same system that you and I just strung the pearls on the necklace. We connected those dots. We know how it starts, we know the middle, and we know the end of how it goes. Okay, continuing with this story of Paul. Paul purified himself and gave notice of the completion of the days of his purification. And when the 7 days were almost over, that's for touching a human corpse. Then he shows up at the temple and goes in. Paul is abiding by both the culture and the law of Moses. And this is the complaint. He has brought Greeks in and he has defiled this holy place. So after, I can't prove this by text, but by inference. I haven't found a text yet that covers this. I've been studying this for a lot of years. Just hasn't shown up on my radar screen. Maybe there's one there, maybe there's not. But the temple's already been defiled in the minds of this mob. And so the unnatural shedding of blood by an execution would not make the temple defileder or more defiled. It's defiled or it's not defiled. Okay, and they were seeking to kill them. That's why we jumped through all those hoops of looking at Philo and looking at Josephus and looking at those two inscriptions, is because that's really clear. It's the death penalty. It's without appeal, and it doesn't even matter if you're a Roman citizen. Well, Paul was a Roman citizen. Doesn't matter. That he doesn't get out of jail free card. If that is true, it wasn't true, but he was about to lose his life. Away, look at this. Away with this fellow from the earth, he should not be allowed to live. There it is again, death penalty. This is the only way that we can understand these things. Are you kidding me? You want to kill somebody in the temple? And over what? Bringing Greeks in? That just doesn't register. It'd be like bringing someone unsaved to church. What's wrong with that? But we put ourselves back in the day, it all gets crystal clear. All gets crystal clear. All right, in Acts 24, Paul is on trial. And one of the claims that he makes is, they found me occupied in the temple, having been purified. You have to understand what we just did to get what Paul is saying. Otherwise, we go, well, yes, Paul was ethically and morally pure. He was living a godly life. Of course he's okay. No, that's our world superimposed on the biblical world, and the two are not matching here. The issue he's addressing in this self-defense before a Roman governor and a Jewish king is totally connected to his world, not our world. You get that, right? Okay. Why is it that Paul had to undergo ritual immersion? He hadn't literally touched a dead corpse. He hadn't had sex with a wife that he didn't have, right? He didn't have leprosy. What's going on that Paul would have to have undergone ritual immersion, gotten the token from the pocade, gone up to the temple and given that to the doorkeeper / gatekeeper Levitical guy? Well, it says in the Mishnah, this is rabbinic law, these things convey uncleanness by contact, and one of those is a piece of a corpse. Another is if you go into the country of the Gentiles. Why? It's because it's like us. We have churches, for example, Westminster Abbey, and have people buried under the floor and in the walls of the church. That would never happen in the temple or in a synagogue of the Jews. Why? Because you have to bury outside the city, because burial areas are ritually impure. So the ruling of the early rabbis was, you go outside the land of Israel, you're stepping into Gentile territory. And they bury all over the place. They bury under the floor, they bury in the walls, they bury out in the countryside, and you have no idea when you're coming in contact with or anywhere close to a human corpse. So this is the rule. If you go out of the land of Israel, you're ritually impure. Well, what does that mean? When you come into the land of Israel, you have to, can you fill in the blank? You have to undergo ritual purification. If you want to go into the temple, what's the process? You now know. Every step of the way, you now know. Cha-ching, y'all. How cool is that? How cool are you all? Be blessed and fed and warmed. Okay. How far back does that go, that ruling? Well, Yossi ben Yoezer is a hero of the faith. He was crucified in 150 AD because he refused to stop teaching Torah. And it says that he and his partner, his companion, Yossi ben Yochanan of Jerusalem, and they're both 150 BC. So this has been going on for a long time by the time Paul comes on the scene, 200 years-ish. Had they decreed impurity on the lands of the nations. So outside the land of Israel, they're all impure. You go there, by touch, by contact, you become ritually impure. So this is what's going on in the first century. I got one last thing that I wanted to share with you. These officers, these doorkeepers, they comprised a sort of I don't want to use the word militia because that has all kinds of weird connotations of compounds and people in Idaho and stocking, ammunition and food and stuff. But they sort of comprised a private police force. They were armed. If you're a doorkeeper and you have to bar people from entry and stuff, you are already armed. These are the people who are under the direct command of the high priest. Why? Because the high priest was in charge of the temple. So anything that goes on in the temple, the buying and selling, the sacrifice, who gets in and who doesn't get in, et cetera, is all controlled by the high priest and the high priestly families. So when the order goes for Jesus to be arrested, it is on the charge of blasphemy. Blasphemy. It changes when they turn him over to the Romans. This is one who incites the people to rebellion. So that's an interesting, they're changing venue, they're changing orientation. Jewish, high priest, Sanhedrin sort of situation, now Roman governor. So the charge change. It's like this. You come to Pilate and you go, I want this guy crucified. Really? What did he do? Oh, he blasphemed the God of Israel. Pilate's going, crucify? I'm going to give him a medal. I do it all the time. The more the merrier kind of thing. So you're not going to get a Roman governor to crucify a Jewish victim for blasphemy against the God of Israel. Now, blaspheming the Roman gods, that might have been a different thing, but that wasn't the charge. So the people who are arresting Jesus are not Roman soldiers. I know it says down in the Gospel of John, it says, having received the Roman cohort, but that word's in italics. It's not in the original Greek of the Gospel of John. That's something that modern English editors of our Bibles put in to make it make more sense, but it doesn't make more sense. It doesn't say that they were Romans in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And it doesn't say that they were Romans in John either, because the word is in italics. That means it's not there in the original. You know that though, right? Because you're one of the faith builders. We've gone over this before. Okay? So, but what about the word cohort? I mean, gosh, the word, that's very clearly Roman. It simply meant a large number of armed men. This is a generic use of what used to be a technical term. It's kind of like, well, we are legion, for we are many. Oh, really? So the people, the demons that Jesus cast out of the guy in Mark 5, when they say that we are legion, that means that they're all Roman soldiers living inside this guy? No. So you see what I'm doing, right? That's an argument, an argumentum ad absurdum. The point needs to be made is that these technical terms have also become terms that are used in a more generic sort of category. I could call a legion of angels down and they would deliver me, Jesus says, okay? He's not talking about calling dead Roman soldiers to come back from heaven and take him, to safety. So the words are used in the New Testament in ways other than a literal group of Roman legionnaires that are under the command of. Can you imagine Pilate giving a whole cohort, if we're talking literal, a whole cohort, we're talking about 600 plus soldiers and auxiliary troops and cooks and the followers camp and all this. It could go up to 1,000, 2,000 people. Can you imagine a Roman governor giving, let's just say for the sake of argument, 2,000 people and send to the high priest, here are all of my armed and trained shock troop soldiers. Go do whatever you want to do. That would never, ever happen. So every movie and every TV show that you've ever seen about the arrest of Jesus is wrong, because they're all being pictured as Roman soldiers with the crests on their helmets and the shiny armor and all this. These are the same Levitical guards that were guarding the doors and the gates of the temple. So now you've got the whole thing tied off. 50 plus Bible passages that when you're reading your Bible, you understand, you're dialed in, you are part of the story. You have what Paul Harvey calls the rest of the story. Any questions real quick? I know we're out of time. Okay, you gonna do your homework? Survey says? You're actually going to remember that? You guys are amazing. That's why I love coming home to y'all. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much. Thank you so much for Jesus. Thank you for the death on the cross. Thank you for blood atonement, Lord God. Thank you that he whom the Son sets free is free indeed. But Lord, thank you also that that's not a myth. It's not a story. It's not a legend. It's not make-believe. This is real stuff that we're looking at, God. And we give you praise that the longer we live and the longer we study and the more that's dug up, the more we're realizing how closely connected the Bible, both Testaments, are to literal physical reality. We thank you, Lord, that we have these things, that we don't have to speculate. We don't have to wonder. We don't have to go with what the experts say, Lord, because we've got it in black and white. We've got it in inscription. We've got it in ancient archaeology. And we thank you, Lord, that the more we apply ourselves to the study of your word, the clearer it becomes and the more powerfully it impacts us. And we want to give you praise for that process. In the name of your awesome Son, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen and amen. God bless y'all. Have a good week. See you again real soon.